Once upon a time, long before the days of heroes, the gods ruled over Earth from their home in the sky on Mount Olympus. They were immortal and all-powerful, and most of them were also terribly bored. So they would often watch the mortals and amuse themselves by causing chaos in their lives. And one day, the gods decided that they needed a party. Oh, there would be no shortage of wine or food at this party, because for some reason, they had an endless supply of both. No, this gathering would be elevated above all others by the presence of music and dance. Unfortunately, only one god knew how to do either, and that was Apollo. But even he couldn't bear to play alone. So he announced that he would play for the party if someone could beat him in a contest. Whoever could play better than Apollo would get anything they wanted. Now, the gods weren't really looking forward to playing music, but it wasn't hard to find someone who would take up the challenge. Eris, the goddess of discord, always eager to cause trouble, stepped forward and boasted that she would beat Apollo at his own game. The gods looked at each other in surprise. Music was one thing, but surely Eris wouldn't have stepped up if she wasn't completely sure. With a mischievous smile on her face, she picked up a golden apple and sang out, "Whoever is fairest of all shall receive this." Well, that escalated things quickly. But before anyone could stop her, Eris tossed the apple into the crowd and disappeared in a puff of smoke. The partygoers stopped dancing and started arguing. Everyone wanted the apple. Hera, wife of Zeus, thought she was obviously the fairest. After all, the king of the gods had chosen her to bear his children. Athena, goddess of wisdom, also felt she was a strong contender. And then there was Aphrodite, goddess of love, whose beauty was legendary throughout the cosmos. For a moment, none of the goddesses wanted to admit that the apple might belong to one of the others. Then suddenly, Hera screamed, "This apple belongs to me." At first, the other goddesses ignored her, but when Hera began to threaten them, a massive fight broke out. The partygoers scattered as the three goddesses began to scream and shout. The noise was deafening. The table overturned. Wine spilled everywhere. It was the worst party in history. Zeus looked down from Olympus and sighed. This was exactly the sort of mess that he hated. But unfortunately, he was also the only god who had any power over the others. So it was up to him to stop the fight. And he did so with one simple decree. The apple would not be awarded to Hera, Athena, or Aphrodite, but to a mortal man named Paris, Prince of Troy. Now, if you've ever been to Mount Olympus, you know that once the gods leave, the place looks pretty bare. That's because they bring everything with them when they travel. Golden thrones, silver goblets, clouds to sit on. You name it, they bring it. So now the hall was empty, the party was ruined, and the gods were eager to get away. They vanished one by one until only Zeus remained. And he wasn't going to stick around much longer. Before he left, though, he looked out over the mortal world and spoke with a voice like rolling thunder. My father had a son. His name was Tros, from whom the Trojans descended. But his son had a son, and his son had a son. And eventually, one of them had a son named King Priam, and he had a son named Hector, and he had a son named Paris, and he will receive the apple of discord. And then Zeus was gone. The messengers of war flew across the Aegean Sea, carrying tidings of strife to every city and village, all the way from Phthia to Troy. Meanwhile, Paris sat in his royal court thinking about what to do next. Obviously, he couldn't keep the apple. Whoever was fairest should receive it, and he didn't want to claim that it was him. But there was only one way to find out who was fairest. He would have to ask all the women in the world. Fortunately for Paris, the messenger of Aphrodite was waiting patiently outside the palace, and she didn't have to wait long for her opportunity. Paris sent word to all the women of the world to gather at the temple of Aphrodite. He would choose one of them to be the fairest, and she would become his wife. Meanwhile, in the great city of Sparta, men were preparing for war. Menelaus was the king of Sparta, but his brother Agamemnon was the leader of the Greek army. Still, Menelaus commanded respect. He was a warrior like his father, King Tyndareus, and he was married to Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Her beauty was so great, in fact, that the other goddesses had fought over her. But Menelaus loved her all the same, and he vowed to get her back if she was taken away from him. In the Trojan War, Paris was already having second thoughts about the whole plan. What if the fairest woman in the world was his sister? That would be awful. But then he remembered what Aphrodite had whispered in his ear. She had promised that the woman he chose would be the fairest in the world. So Paris felt confident that nothing could go wrong. And when Helen arrived at the temple, he knew that he had made the right decision. She was more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. Paris led Helen away from the other women and told her that she was the fairest of them all. Then he asked her to come with him to Troy, where she could live in luxury as his wife. Now, Helen wasn't exactly thrilled about being sold to the highest bidder, but she knew that she didn't have many options. So she agreed to marry Paris, and off they went to Troy, where King Priam welcomed them with open arms. Paris gave Helen a tour of the city and showed her everything that she could have as his wife. She was dazzled by the sights and quickly forgot about her problems back in Sparta. Menelaus, on the other hand, was not having a good time. When he heard that Paris had taken Helen from him, he called his brother Agamemnon and told him to get ready for war. The two brothers sailed to Pylos and gathered the strongest warriors from all over Greece. There was Odysseus, king of Ithaca and the most cunning man alive, Ajax, son of Telamon, the strongest man alive, and then there was Achilles, son of Peleus and the fastest man alive. These three were known as the Danaids, and they were the backbone of the Greek army. At first, Agamemnon wanted to invade Troy right away, but he knew that he didn't have enough ships. So instead, he sent a letter to King Priam demanding that Helen be returned. Of course, Priam refused, so Agamemnon assembled his fleet and set sail for Troy. The Greek army landed near the city and built a camp while Paris prepared Troy's defenses. He knew that an attack was coming, but he didn't know when. And when it happened, it would be brutal. So he invited the other princes of Asia Minor to join him in fighting the Greeks, and among them was a man named Hector. Unlike Paris, Hector wasn't interested in fighting. He just wanted peace between Troy and Greece. But Paris had dug in his heels, and the two brothers would spend the next 10 years fighting each other's battles. When it comes to the story of Troy, we all know the basics. Paris shoots an arrow at Achilles' heel, and that's the end of the hero. But Achilles isn't the only important character in this story. Hector is one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. He is the embodiment of courage, strength, and honor. He is the best Trojan warrior and the only person who can stand up to Achilles. And yet, despite all his accomplishments, Hector is doomed to die. From the moment Paris shoots that fateful arrow, Hector's fate is sealed. He will never see his family again. He will never live to see the fall of Troy. He will never enjoy the fruits of victory. Instead, he will die on the battlefield, far from home, knowing that he has failed his city and his people. What makes Hector's story so tragic is that he doesn't have to die. If Paris had listened to his advice, if the Trojans had made peace with the Greeks, if Achilles hadn't been so stubborn, then Hector would have lived a long life and died a hero. But that's not what happens. Instead, we see Hector's death as a necessary evil, a sacrifice that must be made in order for the Greeks to win the war and take back Helen. We also see Hector's death as a symbol of the inevitability of fate. No matter how hard he tries, no matter how brave he is, Hector cannot escape his destiny. The arrow that kills him has been shot before he was born, and there is nothing he can do to change it. Still, there is hope in Hector's story because although he dies a hero, he also lives on as a legend. His deeds are remembered long after he is gone. and his name is spoken with reverence by those who knew him and those who only heard stories about him. In that sense, Hector's death is not in vain. It is the price of glory, the cost of greatness. But the glory and greatness that follow are worth the price. In the time of ancient Greece, there was a war that shook the world. It was a war so epic that it was sung about for centuries by bards and poets, the likes of which had never been seen before or ever will be again. It was the war between the Myrmidons and the Trojans. And today we're going to take a look at what may have happened during that war. But fair warning, this is a tale of valor and glory, but also one of loss and sorrow. So brace yourself and let us begin. The sun rises over the Aegean Sea, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson. In the distance, the Greek ships are anchored, their sails furled, their oars locked, resting for now from their long journey across the waves. The sea is calm, mirroring the serenity of the dawn, as if nature itself is holding its breath, waiting for the day to unfold. From afar, the Greek camp stretches out, a tapestry of tents and activity. Shields are propped against tents, some bearing the emblem of the Achaean League, others displaying the crests of their respective city-states. Soldiers move about, not in a frantic rush, but with a practiced calmness born of long preparation and countless drills. Nearby, blacksmiths tend to their forge, the rhythmic ring of hammer on metal, a steady beat in the symphony of the morning. Some soldiers polish their armor, their movements precise and economical, while others sharpen their spears, each flick of the wrist honed by years of practice. In the center of the camp, a group of warriors train, their swords flashing in the morning light as they parry and thrust. Their movements are fluid, graceful even, yet deadly. The air is alive with the energy of controlled violence, a dance of aggression and defense, a ballet of steel and sinew. As the sun climbs higher, bathing the camp in its golden light, the pace quickens. Orders are barked, formations shift, and the air crackles with anticipation. The Greek army, a well-oiled machine, is preparing for action. They are ready to face whatever the day may bring. Meanwhile, high above on Mount Olympus, shrouded in clouds, Zeus sits on his golden throne. His eyes, like lightning, scan the vast landscape below. In his hands, the king of the gods holds a scepter that seems to gather the power of the winds, the whispers of men and the murmur of the seas into its polished length. Around him, the other gods are gathered, each a silent observer of the drama about to unfold, knowing that the fate of men is hanging in the balance. Between Zeus and the mortal realm, Athena stands, clad in silver armor that glistens like moonlight on water. Her helmet, crested with an olive branch, is tucked under her arm, revealing the resolute set of her jaw and the fire in her eyes. She holds a shield emblazoned with the head of Medusa, and in her hand a spear gleams, tipped with bronze and feathered with the plumes of a conquering bird. Her stance is firm, her posture straight, radiating strength and unwavering focus. Whether it be wisdom or warfare, she is ready. Beside Athena, Poseidon emerges from the crashing waves, his form half human, half horse, his lower body that of a powerful stallion, muscles corded and hooves pawing the clouds. His upper body, noble and stern, bears the weight of the sea and sky on his shoulders. His expression is stormy, his eyes flashing with the wildness of the ocean he commands. His trident, tipped with coral and edged with sea foam, is raised, poised to unleash the fury of the deep upon the world below. He is the earth shaker, the storm bringer, and his every move rumbles with the power of creation and destruction. As the sun climbs higher, illuminating the dew-kissed grass and flower-studded fields, the ground trembles. A great hush falls over the land, even the birdsong stilled as if nature itself is holding its breath. From the ramparts of the city of Troy, a lone warrior watches. It is Hector, his eyes narrowed against the glare of the sun, his brow furrowed in thought. He is the son of King Priam and the most valiant of the Trojan warriors. His armor, though not yet donned, is laid out beside him, gleaming in the sun, a testament to his prowess in battle. Around him, the tall, unbroken walls of Troy glow in the morning light, silent sentinels guarding the secrets and stories of a bygone age. Across the plain in the Greek camp, a figure stirs. It is Achilles, his face half hidden in the shadow of his helmet. Like Hector, his armor is laid nearby, a showcase of exquisite craftsmanship and the promise of fierce combat. With movements as swift and smooth as those of a predator, he pulls on his golden breastplate, each scale a masterpiece of art and fortitude. Over his lithe frame, the armor gleams, reflecting not just the sunlight, but the indomitable spirit of its wearer, the bravest and most lethal of the Greek warriors. As Achilles finishes his preparations, the wind carries the distant sound of drums. The rhythm is slow and measured, a heartbeat in the stillness of the morning. Slowly, inexorably, it builds in volume and intensity, rising to become a thundering crescendo that shakes the very foundations of Troy. Achilles, his face impassive behind his helmet, listens, his eyes fixed on the distant hills where the first rays of the sun touch down. From the highest peaks of Mount Ida, the epic contest is visible, a panorama of violence and valor. On one side, the Greeks, a sea of white shields shimmering in the sunlight, their ranks unbroken, their spirits high. And on the other, the Trojans, a wall of bronze and flesh, their faces grim, their resolve unbending. In the thick of the fray, two figures dance, their movements a blur of muscle and metal. It is Achilles and Hector, locked in a deadly embrace. Hector, the bulwark of Troy, is a picture of stoic courage, his sword deflecting and parrying with an economy of movement that speaks of countless battles fought and won. But his most potent weapon is not steel and stone, but his spirit, a lion's heart encased in a man's chest, roaring defiance in the face of death. Opposite him, Achilles moves like a tempest, his anger a force of nature, his attacks relentless. Every lunge, every thrust, every kick is imbued with the raw power of the wind, the sea and the sky themselves, each strike carrying the threat of annihilation. Yet amidst the fury, there is a strange sort of beauty, a deadly ballet of hate and valor, a celebration of martial arts and the futility of war. Slowly, inexorably, the tide begins to turn. The Trojans, though brave, are tiring. Their ranks are thinning, their defense becoming less organized, their attacks losing their bite. The Greeks, though no less weary, press their advantage, pushing forward with renewed vigor, their discipline and numbers beginning to tell. Yet even in this moment of impending doom, Hector does not falter. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he makes a final stand, a defiant gesture against the encroaching darkness, a last-ditch attempt to stem the tide of war. With a roar that echoes the courage of his forefathers, he fights on, even as the shadows lengthen and the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. As the day wanes, the Greek camp settles into a tense quietude, a calm before the coming storm. The fires of 1,000 hearths are lit, casting flickering shadows that dance and weave tailies on the tent walls. The smell of roasting meat mingles with the smoke of 1,000 campfires, creating an aroma of survival and sustenance in the heart of a battle-scarred land. Men, weary from the day's labors, eat and drink, sharing stories and jokes in an effort to keep fear and fatigue at bay. On the Trojan side, the atmosphere is one of quiet determination. The citizens, hardened by years of conflict, move with a practiced efficiency. Their steps sure, their voices low, their faces grim. Inside the palace, King Priam sits on his throne, his face etched with worry. Around him, his advisors huddle, their voices hushed but urgent, their eyes flickering with anxiety as they discuss the latest news from the front line. As night falls, the moon, A silver sickle in the velvet sky cast long shadows across the battlefield. The wind, now colder, whispers tales of fallen heroes and forgotten gods through the tall grass, rustling the leaves of the old oak trees that stand sentinel over the carnage of the day. On the battlefield, two armies lie ready, not just for the coming dawn, but for the fate of their cities, their people, their very survival. For tomorrow is another day in the grand theater of war. The Greeks had come for vengeance. Helen, the woman whose face had launched 1,000 ships, was now back in Greece, safe with her husband Menelaus, and the Greeks had won. After 10 long years of fighting, the great city of Troy was theirs. But how? How did the Greeks, those noble heroes, do it? They tricked the Trojans. The last Trojan king, Priam, was dead, killed in the sacking of his city, but before that, he had made one terrible mistake. He had taken in the giant wooden horse the Greeks had left outside the city walls, thinking it was a gift, but it wasn't. That horse was full of Greek soldiers who waited until nightfall, and then slipped out one by one, opening the gates for the rest of the Greek army. And now those same Greeks were running through the streets of Troy, killing every man, woman, and child who got in their way. Women screamed, children ran for cover, and Trojan men dropped their weapons and surrendered. The great city of Troy was being burnt to the ground. The story of Troy is an old one, older than history itself, it seems. And everyone knows that the Trojans lost, that the Greeks won, and that all those years of fighting weren't for nothing. But what if they were? What if the real story of Troy is the story of the Greeks? Of how even though they are the winners, they might have lost something important along the way. So here's the story of the fall of Troy, told again and again and again. After the fall of Hector, the city of Troy trembled. The Greeks had fought for years, but Troy's walls still stood tall. Inside the city, the Trojans mourned. Yet they refused to surrender. The elders begged King Priam to reconsider. Even Hector's brother Paris, who had dealt the fatal blow to Achilles, urged peace. They had fought valiantly, but against the combined forces of Greece, their strength was failing. And the Greeks, though bloodied and weary, were eager for more, if only some god would decide to intervene. On Mount Olympus, the gods continued to interfere. Zeus watched silently, his eyes heavy with destiny. He knew the fate of Troy was sealed, but his heart ached for the brave Trojans. Beside him, Hera seethed. She had hated the Trojans as Paris had judged her as the least beautiful of the goddesses. But now, watching them suffer, she felt no joy. In fact, she was almost sorry for them, almost. Far below, Odysseus surveyed the battered city walls. Though grievously wounded, his mind raced, devising new strategies. His men had breached Troy's mighty gates, but without Hector, the city held fast. He needed another trick, something to break the Trojans' will to fight. He had to think quickly. His men were growing restless. They wanted the war to be over, to go home. Then, as if Athena herself had whispered it into his ear, Odysseus had an idea. He ordered his men to gather wood and build a horse, a great wooden horse. To the Trojans, they would tell them it was a gift, an offering to the goddess Athena, who had favored the Greeks in the war. Maybe Athena would then take pity on Troy and end the fighting. Maybe she would even grant Troy victory. That seemed like the best option. All they had to do was wait for the right moment to unveil their ruse. In the meantime, Athena glowed in her golden armor, whispering guidance to the Greeks. Meanwhile, Poseidon's storms tested their ships, repairing any damage wrought by the Trojans. The war was no longer just of men, but of gods as well. Meanwhile, back in Troy, the leaders argued fiercely. Paris demanded they keep fighting. His friend Aeneas, son of the goddess Aphrodite, agreed. Aeneas, destined to found the Roman Empire, was a hero indeed. But even he couldn't deny the hopelessness of their situation. Troy was surrounded, besieged, and starving. If they didn't end the war soon, their enemies would tear down their walls and kill every last Trojan. As days passed, the Trojans grew weaker. Their bodies wasted away from lack of food and sleep, and their spirits, once so high, drooped like the wilting flowers in their gardens. Many urged King Priam to surrender, but he refused. To surrender would be shameful. To surrender would mean admitting defeat, and Priam could not do that. Not while he was king. Not while he lived. Across the battlefield, Odysseus watched the Trojans closely. He knew that they were at their breaking point. Soon, they would do anything to end the war, no matter the cost. He waited patiently, knowing that soon his trick would work. At last, one day, the Greeks announced they were leaving. The Trojans stared in disbelief. Could it be true? Were the Greeks really leaving? Had they given up? Was the war over? The Trojans couldn't believe it, but it was true. The Greek ships were sailing away. The war was over. Or so the Trojans thought. For the Greeks had built a huge horse and left it near the city walls. It was magnificent, its size belying its purpose. It looked like a gift, a trophy, a sign of respect. Some Trojans wanted to destroy it, seeing it as a symbol of the war, but others stopped them. They had endured for 10 long years. Now peace was within reach. Why risk it? Let the Greeks leave, they said. Let them take their gifts. This was the last Trojan victory. They had to savor it. And so the Trojans led the horse into the city, ignoring the pleas of Laocoon, a priest who warned that the Greeks would soon return. But his words fell on deaf ears. The Trojans were tired of fighting. They wanted peace. They wanted to forget the war. That night, the city celebrated. Torches lit the streets. Songs filled the air. And for the first time in years, the Trojans believed the war was over. Within the wooden horse, Greek warriors waited in silence. They did not move. They did not breathe too loudly. They waited for night to fall deeper. When the city slept, the Greeks crept out of the horse. They opened Troy's gates. The waiting army rushed in. Fire spread through the streets. Cries echoed in the night. The proud city of Troy began to fall. The gods watched, unmoved. For them, this was not the end. It was only one story among many. The war had ended, but the legend of Troy had just begun. You can watch The Fall of Troy, the epic conclusion of the Iliad, now on Prime Video. Click the link in the description to start watching now. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more mythology videos just like this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.